次はアラス・ビルゲンさんによる This is the not command line 7 ways human talk to each other です。よろしくお願いします。
Thank you very much for the introduction. Good afternoon, everyone. Today, I am connecting from Istanbul, Turkey, and I'm very happy to be with you today, even it is from a remote location. Today, I will be talking to you about something that is maybe not as technical. Most DevOps conferences start with things on the command line, things on the server side, things on the pipeline. We are going to be talking about something that is slightly different than what we normally see on the command line today. And it will be about how humans talk to each other, which is very different than how we talk to computers. So to see that, let's see how we talk to computers first. When we want the computer to do something for us, we basically tell them what we want, and then the computer does it. There are cases when we want them to do something, but we don't necessarily find the right words for it. We use our own words to convey them what we want. And in that case, they tell us that they can't do that. And sometimes when we correct our error, then we get what we want. Sometimes we ask the computers to do something that is not usually within their capabilities. It can be hard for them, or they can be taught to not to do that, and they tell us that they can't do that either. In those cases, especially in some of those cases, we can ask the computer to do really hard and to do whatever we want. So this is an easy way to talk to computers, and the way that we talk to machines is fairly easy in this case. When we talk to machines, there's a very clear order. You first talk, and then the machine responds. And then this order never changes. There's a very clear way of passing from one to the other. There is also no ambiguity. The syntax and the grammar of our conversation is well known. Neither the machine nor us can make changes to this. Some of you may say, well, we can write a script. Yes, then we are defining another type of syntax. So there is always the known syntax and the known grammar that is shared between the machine and us. There's also a difference between how you talk to a machine to how you talk to a human. With a machine, you can try with infinite times. You can ask the same question over and over. You can want the same thing over and over, and the machine will not feel bad about this. They're not going to feel bad about your wrong inputs. They're not going to feel bad about you asking for the same thing over and over. There's just not bad feelings when we go back and forth. The biggest interesting thing about conversation with machines is that the fact that silence is okay. You can just sit there for 30 minutes, not typing anything, and the machine is not going to go back to you and say, oh, is everything okay? So silence is very much okay with a machine. Now, the way that we talk with machines is very different than how we talk with humans. Human conversation has so many little nuances, so many little things that we need to take care of, so many little things that we need to talk about, so many little things that we need to keep in our minds to keep the conversation going in a good way. I have spent considerable time on both types of conversations. I am trained as a computer scientist. I have 2 computer science degrees, and I have been coding since my early ages. Started with a Commodore 64 on a screen like this, and I loved it. I loved doing something with the computer. I loved instructing the computer to do something for me, and I loved the fact that you had to stay with certain boundaries so that you get exactly the same result whenever you execute your commands. I still love that area. But throughout the time, I have developed interest in user experiences. So being able to talk to real humans, understand their needs, and turning them into technology solutions to solve their problems was something I was very, very interested in. So when I started studying design and user experience, I realized that there are so many differences between the human side of conversation and the machine side of conversation. Throughout my career, I had the chance to act as a lead for small teams. I have been a manager for larger teams. I have been in director roles where I managed managers managing different teams. And in that career progression, I felt that the human conversation side had a lot more things that can make someone a better listener, a better manager, a better workplace colleague. That is why I wanted to focus on the human side of the conversation from a design perspective. To distill what we have learned throughout this journey, I wrote a book in 2020 about how you can understand users and turn their needs into technological solutions. The book is just like this. There are 9 chapters in the book, and we start with how we listen with our egos, how we listen with certain biases, and then we talk about how to turn customer insights into technological solutions. And as a part of this, we also realized that there are certain conversation styles that can help people understand or misunderstand what they are hearing. And to us, that is a very important part of this book. If you want to read about this, the English version and the Japanese version is available on Amazon.com. The Japanese version actually just came out at the beginning of this month. Even I don't have a copy yet. So if anyone will have a copy, I will be very, very jealous. As I said, the important part of listening and understanding people is to know about the type of conversation that you're having. And as a part of this research, we have identified 7 conversation styles that have applied to all of the conversations that we're having. So let me go through these one by one. The first type of conversation that you have is a leisure type of conversation. In a leisure conversation, the goal is to just keep talking. It's to have fun, to exchange, nice things. The informational goal isn't there. You are not really there to learn about something. You don't necessarily care if you actually learn new things at the end of the conversation. And the emotional goal of the conversation is to just feel good. You may not be as open to bad things. It's all about fun things. It's all about the conversation and how it goes. The second type of conversation is the theatrical conversation. In a theatrical conversation, you're having a conversation, but the goal is to entertain someone. You are trying to attract someone else's attention, not the person that you're talking to. You're playing a game, you're playing a role to attract other people's attention. You mostly worry about impressing someone else, not the person that you're talking to. So you have this ongoing attractive conversation. There is a very little informational goal here. And the emotional goal is to make someone else happy. You're not trying to understand the person that you're talking to. You're trying to impress someone else. The third type of conversation is an interrogative conversation. In an interrogative conversation, you are talking to someone and you're trying to extract information from them. You know that they're hiding the information. You know that they have it and they are not giving it to you. So you're essentially hunting and squeezing them for information. This is very bad because you're basically not respecting them. When they say something that you don't want to hear, you're like, no, I have to push. I have to ask why. I have to ask why. I have to ask why again so that they tell me what they're hiding from me. There's very focused. The informational focus is very, very high. And there is a tension in the emotions. You're going back and forth. There's a pull and push between the two sides, and it is not very healthy. The fourth type of conversation is therapeutic conversations. A therapeutic conversation is something where you are deeply listening to someone and to understand their deep needs. If you are working with a psychologist, this is a usual type of conversation that you would have with your psychologist, where they are trying to understand something that is very deep in nature so that they can fix your problems or help you make sense of whatever you're having today. This is a very, very hard skill. I would say that, including me, none of us are actually trained to do this properly. We are not psychologists. We haven't had that training. So going deep into that level is hard for us. Sometimes we may feel like that when we are talking with a friend. Oh, like I'm like their psychologist. But in essence, this is something of a very different nature, where we're going super deep to understand someone's underlying needs. The fifth type of conversation is an evaluative conversation. In an evaluative conversation, you are trying to understand if someone actually meets a certain set of criteria. A manager-employee conversation is a good example of an evaluative conversation. A yearly performance review is a good example of an evaluative conversation. Here you have a list of things, you know what is good and what is bad. You're just telling the person whether they are good or bad. There is actually not much of an informational goal here. It is almost a one-way conversation. And the emotions can be sometimes a little challenging when you're going through an evaluative conversation. The sixth one is a persuasive conversation. In a persuasive conversation, you're trying to convince someone to do what you want them to do. You want to learn from them with the goal to convince them to do something. You kind of manipulate them sometimes. The emotions can be hard to manage because there may be laughter at one point, there may be doubts at some point, and in a persuasive conversation, you want to catch these, squash them, so that the person who you are talking to does whatever you want them to do. So these 6 conversations are very common across our daily lives. We choose, and consciously or unconsciously, we choose between these to make a contact with the people that we are working with. However, there is one more very important conversation style that is different from these 6. This conversation style is key for us to understand other people in a neutral way, so that we can do something together with them without hurting their feelings, through a good connection on the human side. And that is an empathetic conversation. When you're having an empathetic conversation, you are genuinely interested in the person that you're talking to just because they're human. You are open to their emotions. You are open to whatever they are going to share with you. You are open to receiving any type of information that they give you, only because you care about them as a human. In an empathetic conversation, you care about the human side of the conversation just as much as the informational side. You know that you are talking to someone just like you, that they have things in their minds, they have gone through certain things, and you're putting a conscious effort to withhold your judgment and biases against these. A lot of the times when I say empathetical conversations, people immediately think about sad things. Oh my God, like I am hearing this and I'm having an empathetical conversation. They are telling me so bad things and they're like they're crying. Should I also cry to show my empathy? The answer is no. Empathy doesn't mean that you need to do exactly what you're seeing on the other side. It doesn't mean that you have to cry when you see someone crying. All you have to do is respectfully understand why they are crying and not judge it on their side. A lot of the times when we are having these sad conversations, when we hear challenging things from people that we are talking with, there is also another need. Should I help them? Do I need to save them from whatever they're doing? Because they are in a sad situation, right? Well, in an empathetic conversation, you will always hear emotionally challenged things. And some of these may be very hard and very sad. However, unless the person that you're talking to asks you to help them and you are capable of delivering that help, you are not there to save them. You are not there to be a hero. So in an empathetic conversation, all you have to do is to suspend your judgment, stop your biases, and just listen to the person that you're talking to. These 7 conversation styles make up our conversations in a different style. And going between these 7 different styles is a lot easier than you think. And because it is so easy, sometimes the words that we choose, the sentences that we say, can mean something else. When we want to be empathetic, there may be a case when we slip to be evaluative. So let's go through some examples to show you how different word choices, even small choices, make a lot of difference in choosing and landing into a conversation style. Yeah, forget about our manager. How is your cousin doing? This is a very classical example of a leisure conversation. We're trying to have fun. There's a problem, but don't talk about that. Let's just have fun. I think you're overstressing about this. Or, well, here's my advice to you. We know that there's a challenge, that there's a problem, and we're trying to be persuasive about that this is not a problem. This is what you should do. I don't know why you're so upset. Like, you can do so much better than this. This is said with very good intentions. You don't want the person to be unhappy. You want to encourage them to be, to be good. But this is very evaluative and almost persuasive. You have a criteria about what good is. A criteria about the threshold for being upset. You're judging them for not being there. And then you're persuading them, trying to persuade them to go further, to do better. Again, not very much so. I understand why you're upset with our colleague. Do her actions remind of someone? You tell the person what you're saying, and then you go deeper. That is a therapeutic conversation. But what if you did not say the last sentence? What if you just said, I understand why you're upset with your colleague? Then you're having an empathetic conversation. You're reflecting what you're hearing from them, and you are assuring them that their emotions are valid. Sometimes people cannot vocalize. They cannot put to words certain things that they feel. In an empathetic conversation, you can help them do that. You can say, you sound surprised by certain things. In some cases, you can be empathetic by mirroring how they feel and changing the way that they hear. I hear that you're saying this, but I feel that the other person may perceive these actions as that. So creating some awareness and some adjacency to different possibilities. An empathetic conversation doesn't mean that you always have to just say something, summarize something. You can also ask questions when you're having an empathetic conversation. As long as your questions are asked with an open heart, without bias, it is very okay to have conversations in an empathetic questions in an empathetic conversation. What do you think should happen next? What do you think will happen next? Then you can listen with an open heart. Again, do you want anything from me? Can I help you? having that explicit conversation can be a good part of an empathetic conversation. We have listed 7 different conversation styles, and these can be mixed in different ways depending on the type of person that you're talking to and the way that you want to address them. For example, if you are talking with your new intern, you can start with a leisure style and then switch to a more empathetic style to understand their needs, their challenges, their aspirations, where they want to be. And then you can switch to an evaluative conversation to give them advice about how they can be better. And then you can end with a leisure tone to wrap up the conversation in a fun way. This will be very different when you're talking to a director that is older than you, more senior than you. You can start with a theatrical conversation. Why? Especially in Eastern cultures like ours, there are expectations in the society for being a manager and for being an employee. So we start by playing that game. You are my super high director. I am the lowly employee. And after we do the theatrical part, then we can switch to an empathetic conversation to understand what we feel, how they feel about us, and then switch to a leisure conversation to wrap everything up. There may be other cases as well. We have seen examples of how different conversation styles can be combined for a more engaging conversation. Sometimes we don't need to do that. Let's say that we have a colleague that wants to talk to us because he's very sad, and we are doing this over lunch when we have plenty of time to do this. There is no need to switch things around. We can just listen to them with the goal to understand them, and if they ask for it, just to help them. So there are many, many ways to combine these 7 styles to reach a good conversation. But to be able to understand someone and get to a better level, I would like to suggest a few things for better conversations. All of our conversations are full of nuances. That is because we are human. That is our essence. They are not as easy as parsing commands on the command line. We are human, so we have different needs. In these conversations, to be able to get a much better signal, there are a couple of things that I would like to suggest. First is always have an empathetic conversation section when you're talking to someone. Even when you're having a leisure conversation, there may be emotions, there may be things that you want to understand without any prejudices by suspending all of your biases. The best way to do this is to just asking your question, shutting up, and listening. Giving people space to think and to process things and to give you an answer in the way that you want them to hear will go a long way in terms of understanding people's needs. Whenever you ask a question to a machine, you always get an answer. That is not the case with humans. When you ask a question, sometimes you get a silence. That silence may last. Be patient about this, because that silence is that very human nature. In that silence, we process emotions, we process thoughts. That is exactly what an empathetical conversation helps people do. When you do these, remember that you don't have to be a hero. You don't have to be anyone's therapist. You don't have to be anyone's parents. There's temptation in us to help other people, especially if that person is close to us, especially if that person's success depends on us. But unless they ask for it, we don't need to do this. And finally, and this advice I think is very easy to apply in Japan, is to practice through mindfulness. Picking a conversation style, getting in it and getting out of it should be deliberate. And nothing helps this more than being mindful and intentful about how we're talking to people. When we have good intentions, when we know what we're saying, and when we know that we want to listen to someone with an open heart, that is when we can make changes and impact them in a more positive way, all by just choosing words, asking something, and then shutting up to listen with an open heart. I want to thank you very much for listening to me today and having time to attend this session. You can always reach me at LinkedIn, Twitter, or you can find the details of my book at prr.arasbilgen.com. Once again, I want to thank you for choosing to be with me today. And if you have any questions, you can use the chat or you can just ask the question and we can have a conversation together. Thank you very much.
どうもありがとうございました。今、チャット欄の方は特に質問はありませんが、会場内で質問されたい方いらっしゃいますか？大丈夫そうですかね。はい。では、アラさんどうもありがとうございました。
Thank you very much.